let's go with our science critic. And he surprised me. He talks about testing the hypothesis. I have no idea what he's talking about. What do you mean testing the hypothesis? Okay, so let's see. And he also says that because we have our proposal, which is the rope hypothesis, which is more or less looks like this. We're saying this is what's between any two atoms. My fists are the atoms here, and we're saying this is what the basic system is out there. Two atoms bound by a pair of twine threads, and they're bound because the same threads build the atoms. So everything's a single thread in the universe. Okay, that's the hypothesis. That's our proposal, our assumption. That's our starting point, so that people can follow the train of thought. And it turns out this fellow says, how does he test the hypothesis? How is he going to test his rope hypothesis? So let's listen to him first. Here, let me put him on. Oh, sorry. Here it is. Here it goes.
The issue to be addressed in this rebuttal is, what can it possibly mean to test a hypothesis?
Noticed how he just brushed over the testable part, which is a very big part of science, testing your hypotheses. I wonder if Bill has ever tested his silly string hypothesis, or if it can even be tested.
Okay, so he wants to test the hypothesis, whatever that means, and then he wants to say, well, Bill, how do you test your rope hypothesis? How do we test that one? How do we, prove it? Prove its existence? I'm not sure exactly what he's got in mind. And so let's clarify some issues here. First of all, these are the notions that people have of what a hypothesis is. This is what people are brainwashed in high school. Typically, some go as far as college. And this is what the notions people have in their heads of what a hypothesis is. These are examples, okay? First one is objective state the purpose of a hypothesis upon which the project is based. All these are from official sites, okay? A hypothesis is your question in statement form. Hypotheses are single tentative guesses or good hunches. So we have a purpose, we have question, we have guesses, hunches, like, prediction, because they're going to assume for use of devising a theory or planning an experiment. So they're talking about some kind of prediction that you're going to be making. The next one says it's an assumption. The other one says it's an explanation with some evidence and testing behind it. All these are the notions we have of the word hypothesis, or that the mathematicians have, right? Out there in ordinary speech and mathematics. Any physical theory. A hypothesis is a theory is a hypothesis. They're synonym. And it's always provisional. So if it's provisional, it's a hypothesis. But a theory, I guess, is when it's not provisional anymore, when it's, I guess, accepted. Everybody votes and says, okay, now we turn the hypothesis, we morph the hypothesis into a theory. A tentative theory about the natural world. Again, it's a tentative theory. And then data analysis, says another fellow. So these are all the notions people have of what a hypothesis is. And of course, nobody has any idea what a hypothesis is because they have 100 notions for what it is. So we need to define what a hypothesis is. And this fellow didn't do that. Obviously, he says, oh, how do you test a hypothesis? Can we test Bill's hypothesis? And he said that I'm skipping testing the hypothesis. Yeah, because he's got all these notions, and I don't know which one he's got in his tiny wee brain. So of course, unless we can pick his brain, we won't know exactly what he means by, or what he understands by a hypothesis. Okay, so let's summarize here. These are these notions: an objective or purpose, an investigative proposal or question, a prediction or testable statement, an assumption or guess, an explanation, a theory, and data analysis. How do you like that for a definition? Huh? So are all these synonyms? Do all these notions that you see there for the word hypothesis, are all the same? And I would think not. If I had to bet, I would say no. If I take this to the ETs, to the Klingons on the other side of the universe, and I give them all these notions, they say, well, what do you mean by a hypothesis, Bill? That's what they would tell me. They would tell me to, go somewhere else. You know what I mean? Okay, so here's the rational version of what a hypothesis is. Okay, it's an assumption. And assumptions include three things: the objects that you're going to use, the definitions You're going to use a key definition, the ones that you're going to need for your theory, the explanation that is founded upon these assumptions, and a statement of the facts. Not the facts, but the statement of the facts. Mother Nature knows the facts. God knows the facts. The devil knows the facts, and so does Father Universe. All these guys, they know the facts. They know what happened. They're out there. They know everything. They know all the past, exactly how it happened. Every single frame of the Universal movie is filed in a cabinet. They have access to that cabinet. They know exactly what happened. We humans, we petty humans, we little ants, we don't. We don't know what happened exactly. You were there and you saw how this guy killed someone else. You say, I saw it, it's a fact. Well, you probably know it's a fact. Your notion matches Father, Universe, God, and all these other fellows. But now you got to tell me about it. You got to tell your neighbor about it. And he's got to believe in your word. He wasn't there. He didn't see the killing. So you say, no, Joey killed Johnny. You say, well, maybe you were on drugs that day. Maybe you were drunk. Maybe you killed him and want to blame him. You know, there's all sorts of variations there. And so the rest of the world will not agree with you. They don't know what the facts are. So all you can do is give them the statement of the facts according to your version. The defense attorney and the prosecutor don't always agree on the facts. So each one gives a statement of the facts, of what they think the facts are. Okay, and that's different than the actual facts of what actually happened. Okay, so there's a difference. So we don't talk about the facts, we talk about a statement of the facts. Statement of the facts means this is your version of the facts. Doesn't mean that the other side's going to agree completely with you. Some people have as a fact that God exists. Other people have doubts about that fact. And so you work with those facts, we work with our facts. Everybody's got his own facts, so we call them statement of the facts. Some guy begins his presentation saying, let us assume that God exists. And the other guy says, well, let us assume that God does not exist. So each one works with different facts. We call those statement of the facts. Okay, so a hypothesis sets the stage for the explanation that follows, founded upon it, and which is called the theory. Okay? Theory is an explanation. Hypothesis is an assumption. We don't test assumptions. Okay? And here it is. Well, let me put it over here. Okay, this is the, oh, sorry, got the wrong one. Let me get rid of this. Here's how you test the hypothesis. In science, we don't test assumptions. Okay? Why? Because, in fact, we don't test anything. There's no testing. Why? Because testing is experiment. We don't do experiments in science. Let me say that again. People say, you misspoke, Bill. You said that we don't do experiments in science. Exactly. We don't do experiments in science. The only purpose of experiments is to collect evidence, and the only purpose of evidence is to prove, meaning that you're going to convince, persuade, recruit people. That's the only purpose of doing an experiment, like to show someone something. You're just trying to convince them. We don't do convincing in science. In science, we only explain objectively so the person understands, then he can reach his own conclusions. You can introduce evidence if you want, but that part is religion. That's the one where we try to persuade the guy to believe like we do. Okay, so there's a difference there. One thing is to just state the theory, the explanation, put it out there so that the person understands a mechanism. Then the other thing is to persuade them, say, look, I've got evidence that I'm right. That's religion. That's what mathematical physics does. They work a lot on religion, very little on explanation. In fact, not at all, because all their explanations for invisible, intangible mediators of phenomena, right, are all without exception, irrational. Not even, they don't even qualify for religion, or like they say, it's not even wrong. Okay, so religious belief, opinion, knowledge, and that's what testing is all about. Okay, you test what? To test, to try to bring evidence. And why are you bringing evidence? Well, because you want to convince someone. Okay, so it's irrational to test existence, right? In science, we define existence. So you cannot say, Bill, prove to me. You'll test your hypothesis, meaning prove to me that the rope exists. Okay? And so this is the question for this fellow, if that's what he's got going through his mind. How do you test? How do you experiment? See, touch, hands, eyes, see, touch. You're going to the lab, you're going to run an experiment, you're going to test. How do you test that which is invisible and intangible. Okay? We can't see it, we can't touch it, but you want to go to the lab and test something, run some kind of experiment to prove its existence. And all you needed to do for existence is define the word exist, as we do, which is shape, that which has shape, an object, right? That has location, okay? So here you want to test the hypothesis that God exists out there. So how do we test it? I mean, God apparently is invisible and untouchable, right? So how do we test that? Do we bring God into a room and see if we can see him and touch him? The ghost, the spirit, whatever you want to call it? Or do we define the word exist and say, look, if God is an object, he already has partly qualified for existence, but in addition, he has to have a location. There's got to be distance between my chest and his. Now you have a definition that you can use consistently, and you can say, look, let us assume God exists. Oh, what do you mean by that? Well, I mean that God is an object, and he has location within the universe, meaning there's separation between my chest and his. Now we can follow your presentation because we understand what you're saying. But if you say, oh, God exists, I assume that God exists. Well, what did you mean by that? Did you mean you're going to run a test in the lab and see if you can see and touch him? Is that what you meant? So again, all you need to do is define the word exist, and then the rope exists if it has physical presence. If it's an object, and it does qualify as an object, I hope you see an object here. And then if it has location, if it has distance with respect to other ropes and other atoms out there. And if it does, if there's separation there, then it exists by definition. And so we make the assumption, in order to understand the theory that follows, founded upon it, that the rope exists, meaning it's an object and it has location. We're done. Okay? So there's nothing to test. I'm not going to go to the lab and see if I can touch the rope, if I can see the rope, because it's not going to work. I'm telling you it's invisible and intangible. And you say, then it's not an object. No, an object is not that which you can see or touch. An object is that which has shape. The object already had shape before you came into the room. The moon already had shape before we were born. It was an object by definition because it had shape. Energy is not an object. Field is not an object. Wave is not an object. Those do not have shape. Okay, standalone shapes. Field is a dynamic concept. Energy is a dynamic concept. Mass is a dynamic concept. Plasma is a dynamic concept. So is electricity, and all those words used by so many people out there who call themselves physicists. So that's where the problem is. Okay, you don't go in there and say, well, I'm going to prove the existence of energy. What are you going to do? See and touch energy? Is that what you're going to do? No. If it has shape, then it's an object by definition. And you don't need to prove its existence. All you do is say, look, I'm going to define the word exist, and by definition, energy exists because it's a physical object, and it has shape, and it has location. Then you can talk about the existence of energy. And also that you can talk about energy being an object, a thing. If you cannot if you cannot draw energy for me, show me a picture of energy standalone, and say this is energy and point to it, you cannot even talk about the existence of energy because you still don't have an object, which is one of the requirements for it to have existence.